outline. That is the same thing that, well, let me pull it up. It should look familiar to you because this is sort of what we've been working with. Why does it really on the internet? Nope, I am not offline. Anybody else not able to open the concept outline on their computer? I can post it again if nobody else can. Those should be literally those things that I handed you at the beginning of each unit that had all of the different items. So that's got the key concepts basically, that are, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. You should absolutely review those. Sushruth, is it not opening for you either? That's one thing I don't like about the digital stuff. Okay. So then there are two things, copy of Sweeney map and another thing that starts with copy of Sweeney map. So these items are review items. Okay, this was made by another teacher. Okay, I'm just sharing it with you. I didn't make any modifications, but these are the sorts of things that you should be doing in order to review for the test. Okay, so you should make a list of similarities between Ottomans, Safavids, and Mughals. Your notes on that are all together. Annotate Ming and Qing and Manchu dynasty. Think about the Tokugawa shogunate in Japan. Okay, and most of what you need should be there. I want to double check. Okay, actually, I don't see the map there, so I will have to work on getting the actual map for you as well. Okay. Hang on, guys. Why can't you? And just do your best. And if you can't on another assignment until I can help you, okay? All right, sorry. Yay, NTI. And then the last thing is the copy of 5 document DBQs. And I've given you some instructions on what I'd like for you to do to that. So there's one for Unit 3, one for Unit 4, one for Unit 5, and one for Unit 6. I've given you a schedule of how I want for you to be handling that. I would like, so we're going to look at Unit 3 today during our meeting. By tomorrow, how did I do by tomorrow? You will want to write Unit 4 and Unit 5 today or tomorrow and have 4 and 5 ready to discuss during your small group calls. And then have the full essay for Unit 6 written by this next call, already having that one done, and we'll talk about it as a group. Can we take a moment? I'm going to give a chance for you to give feedback. So let me type this and you can give me a thumbs up, a finger sideways, or a thumbs down. Okay, so you are responding to this. My experience with the small groups and peer scoring in particular was. So we're going to do thumbs up, we're going to do thumbs sideways, we're going to do thumbs down. If you forgot to send your stuff and you forgot to grade maybe stuff that was sent for you, you can put a thumbs down. I'm not going to be like, oh, all of the people who didn't do that are bad kids. Like, there's a global pandemic. You know, normally I'm a fairly strict teacher, but There's a global pandemic. Some of you might have loved ones who are ill. A lot of you probably have stuff going on in your houses with your families that are less than perfect. Yeah, and also I'm not in your face every other day being like, do this, do this, do this. Okay, so for those of you who put thumbs down, actually, maybe you've all also already specifically called yourselves out. If you put a thumbs down because you forgot to do the scoring, please make sure that you get today. Please, please, please. If you had a different concern with scoring, maybe send me a private message and then I can read it out loud. So that way, you know, you're like, well, my peer scorer, blah, 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 blah. And then that one person's like, oh my gosh, that was totally me. They just called me out. So if you have something that you think probably does need to get addressed, like maybe your peer scorer just did a total crap job, or you ran into some struggle that it wouldn't be appropriate to put on the group thing, send me a message and I can read it out loud. Other than that, how can we improve that process? Because like a downside of doing it this way is that if I was having you write essays in class, I could physically watch you peer score them, so I could like force you to do it, you know. Another thing that could happen if we were in class is I could walk around and I could actually read your thesis statement, and you know, if it's fine, I don't really need to say anything, and if it's not fine, then I could give you that instant feedback. So there are some downsides to this. I'm going to ask you, I will put, oh, okay. So Ella, that's a good idea. Especially since it does say come with them done before the call. I don't think that I had necessarily specified that was how I wanted you to do it before. Yeah. Okay. So Otis, yes, that was not fabulous planning on my part. I realized that today, and you are totally right. Particularly if you have a call, say, at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, you're like, oh, so I'm going to be on the call with Ms. Krause, and I'm going to write that DBQ, and then I'm supposed to have 2 more quality DBQs done by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning? Like, are you crazy, woman? Understood. So, yes, and as you can see, Otis, other people totally agree with you. I would do your best on that. Well, here's what I'm going to say. Do your best to get them done, and if they're not done before the meeting, you should have one at least done to send your reading partner, and then maybe you can send the other ones later. Does that make sense? Yes, this makes me wish that the Tuesday thing was further away from the Wednesday meetings. So I would say do your best. Understand, and with the understanding that yes, you all have other classes, and I totally get that. So again, that's a best practice. The more that you're able to come to the small group meeting with, the better you can do. But another thing about the small group meetings, so I'm going to give you a list. I'm going to post it note right now. I'm going to give you guys a list of questions to get started on. And then I'm going to join the meeting maybe 10 or 15 minutes after you guys have begun it. You're like, oh, but I'm going to come in a little bit later, and I'm going to let you guys do some talking back and forth, because I'm happy to facilitate this stuff for you, but we are eventually moving in the direction of wanting you to be able to do these totally independently. So if there's another time, like say that everybody who's got the guys, be nice to Liam. Come on. Otis, know what? Okay, but like, could we talk about somebody else, please? I mean, you could talk about me. Pick on someone your own size. Okay. So here we, oh, so Truth, cut it out. Okay. So In the event that your whole group doesn't maybe have the second DBQ done, you guys can post those, you can share them back and forth. That can happen. Thank you. See, I said pick on somebody else. That's fine. I signed up for this. I'm getting paid to be here. I mean, I would like to think that my DBQs would not be horrible, but really, the better the DBQ is. In general, the better the DBQ is, the easier it is to grade, to be perfectly honest. It's the ones that sort of have a lot of words, but like are struggling at the same time, those are the ones that are actually tricky to grade. So if I wrote a good DBQ, it wouldn't be so bad for you to grade it. Okay, let's see. So does that make sense, though, how I want you guys to use these small groups? The more that you can talk, the better off you will all be. And even if you aren't talking to all 11 of the people in your group at the same time, whenever you're talking about how to write better DBQs, whether it's your DBQ or my DBQ or Otis's or Liam's DBQ, whenever you're having a serious question about this is good, or this is all right, or this is a solid start, right? So those are sort of the options, good, all right, and solid start. You're talking about how to make them better. And that's perfect. Anytime you're having that conversation, your skills are growing. Anytime that you're writing a DBQ, your skills are growing. Anytime you're receiving feedback, assuming that you were properly invested, your skills are growing. And that is the whole point. That is literally the entire point. Okay, so how about nobody says Liam again for the rest of this call? Like, I'm getting sick of it. Thanks, guys. So yes, so everybody needs to have the Unit 4 DBQ done for tomorrow's calls. If your call is on Thursday, you really should have 4 and 5. And you need to make a plan for getting both of those DBQs to the person who is going to be reading them for you by you need to have those to them by Friday morning so that they have a chance to give you some feedback. And that way, when we come to our main session, if you have any general questions, we can move forward. Questions so far? Which ones are those? Okay. So here is what I recommend. So I just posted a packet with the DBQ we're going to look at today, 2 that I want you to try to get done before your small group meeting, and another one that I would like for you to be done with by next Tuesday. I think that it might actually, well, we can maybe have some democracy on this. So there's a really good chance that there will be slightly different people on the call for your group tomorrow or the next day as there were last time. Does that make sense? So last time we sent them to the person below us, but if more people show up on the call, then there are going to be people, like there might be a different person below your name. Does that make sense? So I am satisfied to do this one of 2 ways. Okay, actually, before I say that, let me respond to Olivia. So in your group, you can maybe spend 10 to 15 minutes talking about the Unit 3 DBQ, but you hopefully will be in good shape by the time this call is done. And then you will just need to debrief that. So you'll debrief the Unit 3 DBQ. Talk intensively about Unit 4, and then maybe Unit 5. And what I will say is this: if you were able to write the Unit 5 DBQ, you can have a more productive discussion. If all that you're able to do is maybe look over the documents, you can still have a productive discussion, right? Because you can work with people, you can collaborate, you can discuss what does sourcing look like? What would you say about this document? Or I don't know. I was really overwhelmed by document 3, and I have no idea how I might go about sourcing that or integrating that into my argument. Or I didn't write the essay, but here's my thesis. What do you guys think? Okay, so I would say you should have a debrief of any problems or concerns you had with Unit 3. I think we'll be having a fantastic talk about Unit 4, and then we can kind of see where we're at with the Unit 5 DBQ. Okay? Questions about those suggestions there? Nothing. Okay, so no questions. We're good on that. All right. In the long run, I am definitely going to score a full DBQ for each of you. I would like to get that sometime in like before May 4th. So maybe what you like, there are a couple of different ways you can play that. I got a Post-it note and I said I was going to write something down and I don't remember what it was. But I'm writing down another thing, which is to post additional DBQ practice by this Friday. So already you have what you need for next Tuesday, but then I will post by Friday the stuff that we'll talk about in small groups next week, so that way you guys can have more time to work on that. And you're right, that was really not a lot of time I gave you. So we'll have a variety of different DBQs in front of us. I want to score one, and you can pick which one you are going to give to me to score, and I'll create an assignment for DBQ to be scored. I would like you to use a Google Doc, right? So I don't want you to handwrite that one and then take a picture of it and send it to me. I want you to use a Google Doc, so your handwriting's not going to be a problem for me. I also want you to use a Google Doc because that way I can actually put comments on it, like right in the individual spots where it is. It'll be much easier for you to receive that feedback. You've got some options then. You've already written, I don't know what, you've already written 2, and then I just gave you 4 more, and then there's going to be more that are up starting on Friday, right? So you're like, maybe it was better when we were just annotating those packets. Now all we ever do is write DBQs. Fair. That is a fair criticism, but unlike in normal reality, this is the one skill that you have to be able to demonstrate your knowledge on. So we're going to be doing quite a bit of it, and we're going to be looking at it from different units. But let me talk to you about which one you want. Different ways you can play. Either you can give me the very best one that you think that you wrote, right? You can give me one that you spent too much time on, but I can let you know, did you eventually, with an unlimited amount of time, did you actually achieve all of these skills and get all of these points? If you took more than 45 minutes, you definitely need to tell me that. If you took more than 45 minutes, clearly I'm going to be like I expect. If you would like me to score one that you're like, I don't know, I just took some random one and I looked at the documents and I only took 45 minutes and this is just what I was able to do on a Thursday, let me know how I did. That's fine. Happy to score it like that. Or maybe there's a question that you were like, ooh, I feel like maybe my knowledge is not so fantastic on this topic. And I don't know, I think this is bad. If I write an essay like this on the test, like how bad is my grade going to be? And what would be my emergency things to up my score by 3 points? So you can send me an essay that you don't like. You can send me an essay that you're proud of. You can just send me some random essay that you're like, I don't know, I just did this and, you know, it is what it is. Okay? You can play that whatever way you want. I can promise you I will fully score and give solid interactive, if you want to have a conversation about it, interactive feedback on at least one essay for each of you. And if I have time and you submit a second essay, I will do my best. okay? You know, I do have relatively more time to devote to AP World because of the way that they're asking us to structure. I can spend a little bit less time with the other class. Sushu, that is so not true. So I will give you as much feedback as I possibly humanly can without losing my mind. You know, and if you get me, like, I'll give you a due date, you must submit an essay for me to give feedback on by X date. But if you put yours in early, I can maybe, I don't know. And if you wanted me to do a second one and you happen to submit a second one before I get that massive wave of all the other people, you do have a better chance of getting my comments on a second one. So do we have questions about that level of commenting and direct personal feedback from me? We have no comments. Okay. Hang on. Okay, so Liam, not too much. We were talking about submitting essays for feedback and why you might want to submit a good essay, a bad essay, or just an immediate sort of situation. That was nice of you to find her birth certificate. Is she going to the DMV? And she has to have a birth certificate to get blood? What? That is weird. Okay. Do you guys have the same blood type? That's a really random question. Like, obviously, if you were identical, you would, but you're not. Oh, okay. That's fair. All right. So for the thing that I asked for feedback, is there a scenario where you are certain that you want feedback on more than one essay? If you could just give me a thumbs up if you're like, no, seriously, you're my teacher and I need you to give me feedback on more than one essay, hit me with a thumbs up on that. What? I'm sorry, you have the wrong birth certificate? How do you have was it the hospital one instead of the government? Because legit, there are two, I guess. I guess that is a thing. Did you know that in order to get the birth certificate from the government, you have to submit a form and pay them? Which I thought was really stupid. Like, I mean, it's a birth certificate, right? It sounds it sounds like a cult to me. Yes, for sure. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to scroll back up and see if anybody is really, really sure that they personally, really, and truly want more feedback from me. So again, it says, is there a scenario where you are certain that you want feedback specifically from me on more than one essay? Like, if you feel very strongly about that, please put a thumbs up. Okay, and we had a question, can you submit two at the same time? I guess you can. Okay, 5 robust. Okay, so back to Sushu's question. I heard you cannot get less than a 3. No, that is false. If you literally like submit a piece of paper with 2 sentences on it, you're not getting a 3. What they said, and there was, oh, Lord, there was a big debate. There was a big flame war. You know, when John Green talks about the flame war in the comments, there was a flame war because everybody has to, Otis, I assume he means the test. So part 1, teachers are trying to predict what score will be required to get a 3. Although in all honesty, usually the way that works kind of depends on how hard the question is, right? Like if lots of people are getting 8, it might mean that it's pretty easy to get some of those points, whereas if lots of people are getting 3s and 4s, then maybe that means that the question was crazy hard. Right, so I don't think you can get less than a 1 out of 5. Trying to think of how they had phrased it. They said something to the effect of cap. They didn't use the word cap, but it is conceivable that every person who takes the test, okay, and this is another when the US government was like, well, we no longer pursue a policy of assassination as a tool of regime change. And you're like, okay, so reading between the lines there, what you've implied is that previously we did approve of assassination as a tool of regime change. Because, right, if the College Board is saying, well, it's possible that, you know, everybody who takes the test could, if they get the requisite score, no. This is what happens when I look out the window while I'm talking and not at the screen. So, yeah, they've effectively said it is entirely possible that maybe everybody who takes the test could pass. So the implication of that is that it must otherwise be rigged so that there is no chance that every person who takes the normal test will pass, right? That's what that means, is that under normal circumstances, there is a 0% chance they 100% pass rate. And now I guess what they're saying is that there is a chance of a 100% pass rate, hypothetically. But that's probably still not going to happen, right? Yes, Esther, they have. And this was what the flame war was about, was I think there were a couple of things. So Steve Heimler in his How to Write a DBQ for 2020, he actually took it down and put it back up because there was another teacher who ultimately convinced him that one of the things he said would be the point, maybe wouldn't get the point, so he changed it. And then there was another thing that was a statement that was put out by somebody else, I forget who, but it was popular, who said that the test would be curved, and somebody else started a flame war with him and said, it's not going to be curved, it's going to be statistically adjusted. And there were a bunch of reasonably smart AP World teachers who were like, so a curve is a kind of statistical adjustment? Maybe the idea that there's a curve implies that that curve is uniform, whereas a statistical adjustment maybe wouldn't be uniform. But like stats people, a curve is a statistical adjustment, yeah? Like I'm doing self-study for AP Stats, or at least I was a while ago, and I got partway through the Khan Academy class because I never took stats, and it bothers me that sophomores know more than me. But like my understanding is that a statistical adjustment to change the ranges of which people have 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s sounds kind of like curving, even if it isn't rounded and even if it isn't uniform. So they've at least copped to them being statistically adjusted, whatever that means. And yes, they swear that the tests aren't curved. And then if you look at the percentage of students who get 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s, they are within a couple of percentage points. Like if you look at the same subject over 10 years, the percentage of people who get 1s, the percentage of people who get 2s, et cetera, are plus or minus 2% of test takers every single year. So maybe they're not curving it, but it seems fairly clear that they're manipulating the raw data in some way, that they're selecting certain numbers within the raw data of this is what it means to have a 1. So what they're not doing is they're not saying if you get a 1, if you get 40% of the points, you get a 2, if you get 60% of the points, you get a 3. So yeah. And I can tell you like what they do, at least with the AP Human test, because Mr. Krause reads for AP Human and has from the first time he ever went and he explained how they make the sausage, I was horrified. So the number one thing they teach you in teacher school is that you should make the test before you teach the unit. Why? So that you can make sure that you teach all the things that you're testing on the test, while you're teaching the unit, which makes sense. But that's not how they grade the AP exam. They don't make the rubric first. Are you not familiar with the concept of a sausage factory? Usually it's used in, like when people say, like, do you want to see how they make the sausage? What they mean is that, one, it's a pretty nasty process, and two, maybe there's some gross stuff that goes in there that you don't want to know about. Yes, exactly. The cylinder of mystery meat that is the AP Human Geography test, they don't make the rubric until they have student essays in hand and they read, 1,000 essays, and they look at the range of the responses and they constitute a correct answer. So if you say one of these 10 things as part of your explanation, then you get the point. And if you say something that maybe is avant-garde but correct, but it isn't on the 10 things, then you're screwed and you don't get the point. So I don't quite know how they make the rubrics for AP World because I never actually asked Mr. Sharp. Mr. Sharp is an AP World grader, and I never asked him exactly what kind of sausage making happens there. But another thing that I'm reasonably sure of from everything that I've heard is that there's usually a range of, like I've told you guys before, usually if you were getting at least 53 to 54% of the multiple choice questions correct, you are probably getting right. So that's you can't see my hand gesture here. That's a range, that's approximate. So some years it turns out that maybe the questions are a little harder. So people who are getting 50% are actually the people who are getting threes. Like that's the bottom end of a 3. And some years, a lot of people seem to be getting a lot of them right. So maybe it's a 56 that's getting a 3. So yes, Liam, it would benefit me, although most of the things that I don't know, human is kind of a special situation. Most of the things that I don't know are how they're going to do the cut point scoring and what the total number of points possible in any given year is versus what the total number of points possible is going to be, or not the total number of points possible, but the total number of points necessary to get a 3 is going to be. And that changes slightly every year. But it only changes slightly, which means, at least to me, I read that as they have a target in mind. I guess what I'm saying I don't know is like under normal circumstances for a short answer question when they say, explain a factor that shows that this family is wealthy, do they physically make a list and say, you could mention the jewelry, the fine clothing, or do they just say explain and then it's up to the subjective judgment of the reader? That's the part that I don't quite know because I haven't been part of that rubric making. And to tell you the truth, some of that is done even before the before the average readers get there, right? They have the people who are the average readers, and then they have people who are above them, and then they have people who are above them, and then they have one more echelon above those. So it's, but my point being that every question that is ever made requires, even if the process is generally the same, like the DBQs, where the thesis point, the context point, etc. Even though those things are generally similar, there's no way that you could be like, well, this is all of the outside evidence that is ever going to be counted as correct, right? Like, because that's kind of an infinite number of things that. Okay, moving on. Any other housekeeping questions, either about the scoring of the AP exam or about the scoring of your your essays by me. And I'm looking back. So just reviewing your polls overall, generally positive experiences with small groups. Nobody sent me a private message that said there was a huge problem, and 4 of you are sure that you feel like you could benefit from feedback on more than one essay. So I can definitely do that for those 4 of you. Okay, so no more questions. All right, cool. So here's what I would like you to do. I'm going to give you, let's say, 5 minutes, and I would like you to respond with a context statement, and if you can manage it in that time frame, a thesis statement for the Unit 3 essay. So the prompt on the Unit 3 essay is develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which rulers of land-based empires were able to consolidate their power in the period of 1450 to 1750. So before I give you a chance to go and work on that, I want us to think about it a little bit. So, so you're going to be looking at land-based empires. So your context might want to include something about how land-based empires were developed, why they exist, how they're different from other empires, something along those lines. And then you are trying to figure out whether or not the rulers of those land-based empires were able to truly consolidate power between 1450 and 1750, right? So the extent to which blah, blah, blah consolidated their power in the period of 1450 to 17. Okay? So hopefully you had a chance to read these documents before the call. If not, you can start reading them now, but we're looking for about 4 sentences of context and about 1 to 2 sentences of a partitioned. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. I'm going to be quiet. You're going to read and write, and then we're going to come back and Okay, so guys, if you walked away from the keyboard and you're wondering why it's quiet, we are reading the documents for the Unit 3 DBQ, and we are writing a thesis and a context statement. And we've got another minute or so. All right, give me a thumbs up if you are ready to talk about your statement. So I'm going to give you another minute because it looks like there are 30 something of you on the call and 5 of you posted that you were ready to talk. So I will let you think for a little longer. Also, unrelated, on the right-hand side of my screen, it says that there are 34 people online. However, 41 people in this call. If anybody wants to explain to me how you can be on the call without being online, I would be interested in knowing the answer to that question. Wait, so you can, but Otis, you're not invisible in the call. You're my right-hand side. Got that. Okay. That makes All right. So let's talk about this business. So since Liam posted his, I will talk about that first. So confirm for me, Liam, your thesis is your first sentence. Is that, am I right in understanding that? You can just type yes or no. Or is the whole thing your thesis? Okay, great. That's fine, because I was going to say that I wasn't sure that I saw a thesis in there unless it was that first line. And if it was the first line, I was going to say that it needs more development. Okay, so guys, take a look at this paragraph. So we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sentences. Okay, this is great context, except that there's one big problem the way that I see it. I would have certainly stopped before talking about the lavish buildings such as the Palace of Versailles, and I might have stopped even before divine right monarchy. Not because it's wrong, because it's fine, but nothing. No, you can post a picture of yours, that's fine. Or you can do whatever you want. And it's not that he mentions France, it's that you can't get outside evidence points for anything that is in your context statement. So you want your context statement to be enough to get the point, but you don't want to drop all your facts in your context statement, because then you're not going to have any facts to support your essay with and collect those 2 outside evidence points later on. Okay? So it's not that there's nothing wrong with that as a context statement. It's all relevant, it's all timely. It would absolutely get the point, but you don't want to give away the farm in your first paragraph. You definitely want to save some of the, and not that the Palace of Versailles is low-hanging fruit. I mean, a little bit it is, as far as, hey, this is a way to establish and consolidate and show off your power, not only relative to your own people, but to other people. But that would be really great to use for some analysis and getting the outside evidence point in body paragraph 3, so that you can say, was it Isfahan that they built one of the extra fancy palaces? So I think Isfahan has an extra fancy palace as well. So later on, as far as saying, land-based empires or strong government leaders such as kings and emperors frequently enjoyed building lavish palaces in order to show off the fact that they were able to spend, right, there's so many reasons, but maybe you want to make the argument that their power was so well consolidated, right? They consolidated their power to such a large extent that they could minimize their military expenditures, maximize their ceremonial architecture expenditures, and thereby demonstrate to their people as well as other world leaders their dominance within the region. And then you can make the connection. While this was done in Isfahan and in Constantinople, right? Because that's true. And both of those are sort of pertaining to at least somewhat the documents. Even in places such as France, this same sort of tactic was used. Yes, you could absolutely take the French into outside evidence, and really you wouldn't need to elaborate much more at all, as long as you could say, if your subpoint was, their power was so extensive and well consolidated that they spent lots of money on fancy buildings. Another example where this was done in history, when a monarchy was doing exceptionally well and wanted to show off their well-established power, was the building of the lavish Palace of Versailles and all of its meticulously kept gardens in Europe. Period. Move on. That's all you need to say to get the outside evidence point. Okay? All right, so I'm going to take these in the order in which people shared them. So We're going to look at Luke next. I'll read it out loud in case you don't want to scroll back up or if it's hard on your phone. In the period between 1450 and 1750, European states had risen from the feudal stagnation of their past and had begun to centralize power using strong monarchs and expand through the seas. As they colonized the world with new technology, okay, great, some land-based empires such as Russia, the Mughals, Safavids, and the Ottomans, and Japan, although I have some objections to characterizing Japan as a land-based empire, continue to thrive, although you wouldn't lose any points for that. Their use of gunpowder technology allowed them to expand and unite many countries under their rule. Countries might not be the best word there. Many territories, many peoples, many principalities, but really countries is a post-1776 sort of thing. At the same time, new ideas of education and a rising middle class started to change dynamics between leadership and the people. Okay, that is absolutely going to get the context statement. It might even be a little more than you need. I mean, if you're never going to get back around to technology, then sure, toss all of that stuff into your context, but you could potentially have gotten away with a little less technology if you wanted to use it as outside evidence later. Okay, and then the thesis. Despite a growth and opportunity for the individuals of society, land-based empires were able to consolidate their power through military strength and continued authority of autocratic rule. Okay, I like it. The only thing that worries me, Luke, about that statement, particularly your thesis statement, is that it asks you to evaluate the extent to which, and you are arguing that they consolidated their power through military strength and continued authority, but you haven't argued that their power was consolidated to a considerable extent or to a great extent. So does that make sense? That you will certainly be safer if it is an extent to which prompt. You don't have to use the word extent exactly, but it's asking you to evaluate how intensively and effectively something was done. And I think maybe what Luke is saying here, but again, the reader isn't actually allowed to guess what the student means. So I think the despite a growth and opportunity for the individuals of society. So I think that means individual advancement or individualism. I would simply add to my argument, land-based empires were able to consolidate their power broadly and effectively, blah, 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 blah. But without that statement, I don't think that it's a point, which I really want everybody to see, that there's nothing wrong with that thesis statement. You could totally make an argument there, but it doesn't fully address the prompt. So you can write, and this is a beautiful thesis statement, you can write a fantastic thesis statement. It could be great, it could be beautiful, it could be huge, all of those things. But if it doesn't do the thing the prompt is telling you to do, then it's not going to get the point. So Luke, absolutely, you get the point for context, but just you need that itty bitty change in order to do that. Okay, Liam's question, would I recommend a despite there? I think the despite allows for an interesting discussion of the documents, right? Because that individual study that they're advocating for, that does have some tones of individualism. And maybe what Luke's trying to get at is that they did use authoritarianism to establish a considerable amount of control and dominance. However, they still offered opportunities for individual advancement. I think, Luke, is that what you were getting at when you said that? I think maybe you could have been slightly clearer, but I think it's fine. If you can make that part of your argument, then absolutely do it. But at the same time, I would I would try to make sure that if you're using a despite, that you really have a worthwhile counterclaim that you can use to more thoroughly examine the documents or toss in outside evidence. Like, I would just make sure that you have a good reason for having a despite besides the fact that your teacher told you that it's not a bad idea. Yes, yeah, okay, great. So guys, I hope that you saw right there that, like, Luke's kind of confirmed some of the things that I'm saying, that I understood what he meant, but the reader doesn't get a chance to be like, is this what you meant here? I think this is what you were going for. Like, if the reader isn't 100% sure that that's what you meant, they cannot give you the point. Okay, and let's see. So we'll come back to Olivia's in a minute. Let's take a look at Ella's. And by the way, those of you who are sharing these things, I really appreciate the fact that you are sharing this with 40-something people. And I know that that's not the easiest thing, although obviously you're getting a little more direct attention and some direct feedback. But having these examples to share and go over with the group is absolutely invaluable. So I really, really appreciate your being willing to participate. Okay, so let's took, okay, Sushruth, I see you. Let's take a look at Ella's. Okay, so before the rise of land-based empires in 1450 and 1750, the Mongols were dominating the world. Fantastic, that is true. They conquered areas from Asia to Europe and interconnected the world. Due to this interconnection, the Mongols spread many things when they moved and conquered. One thing was disease, which made decline for many powerful states, allowing for new states to rise. Also, spread was technology such as gunpowder, which also helped new states rise. The only thing I would change there, I mean, that's a perfect context statement. That totally gets the point. I would say technology instead of tech, just to be formal in the writing. And then I would maybe, since we know that we're moving into a discussion of these land-based empires, aka gunpowder empires, I would maybe rework that last sentence a little bit. That gunpowder, certainly it helped some states rise, but maybe it did two things that were maybe even more important. It helped some states fall, and it helped the states that took their place sustain power. Does that make sense? So I would just try to be a little more specific on that since you went there, and I think those are things you know, but that one totally gets the point. And I'm wondering if you guys can just maybe respond with a number once you are done reading the documents. And did it take you to do a context statement? Because these are good. These are well-developed context statements. And like, honestly, of the three I've read so far, the one is make sure that you don't make it too long, that you give away all your outside evidence right there. Well, we're gonna, don't worry, Olivia. We're gonna do thesis statements here in a second, anyways. And I said thesis before I said context. Okay. Next question. Could I use something from a different time period, such as Hagia Sophia, as an example to compare? Yes, you could. Yes, you could. Luke, I'm just now seeing your your oh boy, I forgot to say extent. Okay, let's see. Shrida. In the period 1450 to 1750, land-based empires were emerging and leaders were consolidating power. However, the main source for their consolidation, besides their experience and knowledge, was gunpowder, which was traded along the Silk Road. This gave rise to the Ottoman, Safavid, and Mughal empires. By using military leadership and gunpowder, society was able to unite and reform, leading to the creation of a middle class. In other European states, the leaders used the divine rights idea in order to conquer their people, since the church and the state were not separated at the time. Yes, so that's going to get the context point. I don't love the last sentence just because by 1450, pretty much all the people in Europe had been conquered and they'd been done conquered for a while. And then I guess, Trita, you would just move into establishing that in particular gunpowder and military leadership led to a significant extension of power or authority or something someplace. So question about military expertise. Yeah, I think that based on the way the documents are written, you probably need to say military power and then use something else that it also emerges from the documents. I don't think that you can make the whole thing only about military expertise. Like I see, I haven't fully read Olivia's yet, but I just looking at the last line, it says autocratic central government. And yes, I think centralized government is another fantastic example. And I think standardizing education is a really great way to get to an autocratic central government. So I think that, I think that selection of documents that steer you in a certain direction to have a certain kind of document. Okay, so let's take a look at Olivia's thesis real quick, or I'm sorry, context statement. During the period from 1450 to 1750, rulers of land-based empires were able to very successfully consolidate their power to become rulers of megastates, oh nice, in their respective continents. Although this was partly due to the rulers' experience and knowledge in modern military technology, specifically gunpowder, these empires were mostly consolidated and maintained due to heavy social reforms and the dedication of these rulers to appear as an autocratic central government. So I would maybe just eliminate the word appear, because I think that they didn't just look like autocratic centralized governments. I think they were. But other than that, I think that's a great context statement. And something. Oh, okay, dude. I'm not going to be able to read that. Let me see if I can get this. Okay. From the 1450s to the 1700s, much of the world had started participating in overland trade routes again, including the revival of the Silk Road. Many Asian empires sought to control vital trade routes for influence and profit. Empires in the Middle East, like the Ottomans, Safavids, and Mughals, along with the Russians and Qing Chinese, were characterized as gunpowder empires for their use of guns and modern technology. With this technology, society changed with a larger middle class, and new forms of government and ideology were born under strong leadership. New cities along vital trade routes grew and prospered, with new forms of palaces and architecture showing off the accumulated. I think it's good. I think it gets the context point. Again, I would still, like, my caution there, is just to not give away too much in the context statement. And I know that's like the third time I've said that. And this is a problem that I literally have never had before, where I'm worrying that students are writing context statements that are too well developed. But if it's taking you more than 2 to 4 minutes, it's probably too long. And you want to get in 1 or 2 good name drop factual things, and then maybe jot your other good ideas down on a piece of paper to the side so you remember to come back to them. It is a good problem to have, but it's just really confusing because I've been doing DBQs for like 7 or 8 years, and it's never a problem I've had before. So you guys are special. Okay, let's talk about thesis statements. Is there anybody who has a thesis statement that they would be willing to share? I know, I thought I'd start with somebody else first. Oh, dear God, no. Okay, so if you are writing it, like, Okay, hang on. So please answer my question, which says how many of you are sitting there and didn't write a thesis or context statement? You're not going to be in trouble. Obviously, if we were in class, I just would have made you do it and you wouldn't have sat there and not written it for 5 minutes while everybody else was writing it. I'm just curious to know if literally all of you actually sat and wrote that stuff down or not so much. I don't think we're going to get outside evidence. I don't think we're going to get there right now. But you can send them to me personally if you would like, and I will review them, but I just don't think we're going to make it on this call. Okay. So I have one Vulcan. Teacher, how I need to motivate you is different if most of you sat there and didn't do anything for 5 minutes when I said, look at the documents and write a thesis statement. So if you're shy, you can send it to me individually and I don't even have to say what your name is. Okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. Okay. And that's fine too. Like I'm not mandating that everybody share. That's absolutely not what's going on here. I just want you guys to know that I don't want you to feel discouraged if you're like, wow, a couple of people who apparently like writing and know a lot about history wrote some great context statements. That doesn't help me become a better writer. If you're sitting here right now and thinking that, you should know that there are other ways that that context statements can look that would be totally acceptable and that you don't need to feel discouraged. Yay, somebody sent me one. Okay, so just got a thesis statement that we can talk about. It says, despite the increasing difficulty of ruling the land-based empires due to large size and new conquering, 1450 to 1750 were able to successfully consolidate their power due to military power and education. Yeah, so that's fantastic. Had a question about whether or not those partitions work. I think they do. I think that the only part there, the only thing that's awkward is the due to large size and new conquering. Like it just might, that new conquering is awkward, but you would still totally get the point. And successfully consolidate their power, you addressed the topic of the prompt, which was to what extent. So they successfully did so. You might use a word that describes the extent, so they successfully, but I feel like successful largely meets that. I would absolutely give that thesis statement a point. Let me go back to the general. Okay. Got another one here. So this is a slightly different style. Around the time of land-based empires, many rulers used or kept power in different ways. Some used religion, such as Islam and the Safavids. Others used divine rights, such as many Chinese emperors, and others used military forces, such as the Mongols. I think I would give that the point. That one is only 2 sentences. So I might add one more sentence to maybe establish that the broad importance, that if you didn't find some basis to establish your power, whether it's religion, divine right, military force, at this point in history, you would be failing if you didn't figure out a way to do at least some of those. But I would say I would give that the context point. It might not be quite as strong as some of the others, but I still think it gets the job. Okay. We've got another one here. For varying reasons, land empires began to grow in power and increase their land areas from 1450 to 1750, including methods such as superior technology and armaments like gunpowder, centralized power, and the taking advantage of a power vacuum in the region, correlating to the fall of other empires such as the Mongols. That is a thesis statement, right? Because I see 3 partitions. Okay, so let me reread it out loud because that one came on a private message. So let me reread it so everybody can hear it. And then there's one thing I would change about it. So it says, for varying reasons, land empires began to grow in power and increase their land areas from 1450 to 1750, including methods such as superior technology and armaments, centralized power, and the taking advantage of a power vacuum in the region correlating to the fall of other empires such as the Mongols. So what that doesn't do such a great job of addressing is the extent to which peace. So we provided multiple reasons, we provided multiple methods, and it suggests that the empires were growing in power and increasing their land areas, which suggests that they were successful and had they did consolidate their power to a large extent. But I think that you have to evaluate the extent of that consolidation. So they effectively consolidated, they broadly consolidated, they definitively consolidated, they failed to consolidate, they were only moderately consolidated. Another way you could use to address this is maybe saying, I'm trying to think. Despite the fact that the Russians controlled the land within their empire, no, I would change that. So maybe saying something about, the Safavids and the Mughals were able to consolidate their power to a great degree, which provided maximum stability for their region. While the Russians were able to maintain their empire, they were not able to consolidate as effectively as some of the other land-based empires, and subsequently this caused problems or something along those lines. Right? So you could even evaluate and say, these two are consolidating their power, and this other one didn't do such a good job of consolidating their power, and then they got conquered, or although in this case, I think for the most part, they did do a good job consolidating. Let's see. So question from Arthi. In the thesis sentences, we should be focusing on specificity or just generally establishing your perspective? Okay, so that is a great question. So if everybody looks at Arthi's thing, she said, I wrote one as well, but most of the concepts were covered. Do you think that in the thesis sentences, we should be focusing on specificity or just generally establishing our perspective? What level of specificity? That is a perfect question. So in your thesis statement, you are going to outline your general line of reasoning. So if you say that you're not doing an in spite of, so you're just choosing 3 partitions, you might say that even though empires went about it in a different way, successful land-based empires used 3 common methods to consolidate their power. The methods that were most effective throughout this time frame were the establishment of military authority, including effective use of gunpowder, the use of education to bring about a consolidated and centralized government, and some other thing that I can't think of right now. So I would say that you maybe want to give one sort of detail. Like, you wouldn't just want to say, oh, they established military power. Like, that's not going to be enough. You would want to say they established military power through, a novel application of gunpowder to quell uprisings and conquer territory, right? Like, that would be one partition. But you're not going to, so you're going to be a little specific, like you're going to say the specific thing, but it's just sort of like a movie trailer, right? You're like, ooh, key plot point, but then you don't show how it gets resolved. Does that make sense? That you're going to come back to that and flesh it out later. If you try to flesh the whole thing out in your thesis, it's going to turn into a complete disaster, but you should say sort of the one specific topic. Questions related to that before I talk about the next thing? Yeah, and I do believe that Esther's right. Heimler did say that. Also, if you have not checked it out, Heimler's got a bunch of interesting videos as well for the whole course worth of topics. And he talks slower than John Green. So if you don't like John Green, that would be... What? Oh, yeah. But I mean, if John Green gets on your nerves, Steve Heimler's got a lot of good stuff going on. Correct. And Arthi, the last thing I would say about that is recognize the general concept, maybe name check one important thing, but then skip additional detail. Okay, let's take a look at what Ella wrote. Despite land-based powers having some trouble with their vast territory, okay, so that's good. And I would just say, if you're going to do a despite there, you have to be prepared to have a whole paragraph on them having trouble with their vast territory. And that would be a great spot to introduce some outside evidence, because that's not really represented in the documents. Okay, so despite land-based powers having some trouble with their vast territory, the rulers of land-based powers were to a large extent able to consolidate their power. Okay, so we said large extent, so good job. This is because land-based rulers had a great deal of control over the use of weapons and the people in office of their empire. Okay, so that's 2, as well as being able to control and promote learning to consolidate their power throughout the empire. So there's 3. I would say that since you have 3 partitions, you can get away without the despite. I mean, you totally can. Like, if you have good outside evidence for that and you're ready to give it a whole paragraph, then totally leave it in there. But since you have 3 other partitions, and that's going to cover a lot of that. Okay. So I love that you said that. And I want everybody else to see that. So Ella just said she added the despite because she thought we had to. It's a good idea, but if it's going to actually distract from your main argument, then you don't need it. So literally, Ella's thesis can stand fine on its own. Just delete almost that whole first line. Start with the rulers. The rulers of land-based powers were to a large extent able to consolidate their power. This is because A, land-based rulers had a great deal of control of the use of weapons, and B, the people in office in their empire, as well as C, being able to control and promote learning to consolidate their power. It stands alone, like her thesis is strong enough, it stands alone without the despite. If the despite is going to give her a paragraph where she can introduce outside evidence, Like, did you have something in mind? I mean, they definitely had trouble controlling their vast territory, but did you have a specific instance in mind? If she has a specific instance in mind, then go for it. I mean, include it, absolutely. But if you didn't have a specific instance, then you don't need it, and like, your thesis would be stronger without it. Okay. So it's a good idea for a despite or an although or a however if you've got one, but if you can't think of one, don't sweat it. Like, her thesis is perfectly fine with 3 partitions without the despite. Okay, let's see. I think I got one more here for DM. Although the rise of more capable armies proved a challenge in the creation of large land-based empires, because of new military technology like gunpowder, social reform, and strong central government, land-based empires thrived between 1450 and 1750. Okay, so here, I'm gonna copy this and paste it onto the main page. I don't see an extent to which in here. And again, you don't actually literally truly have to use the words extent to which, but I don't see anything that assesses that even without saying the word extent. It's implied, right? Like, if they didn't do a good job consolidating their authority, then it stands to reason that they wouldn't have thrived. But we didn't actually say that in the thesis statement. So what do you guys think? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Does that get the thesis that is responsive to the prompt? And since it's anonymous, don't feel bad, right? You don't know. Okay, so poll's nice. To the extent they'd be good, I think that that's true. And I think you could modify it very easily. You leave everything the same, you know, and you pick up the second clause, because new military technology like gunpowder, social reform, and strong central governments allowed land-based empires to authoritatively establish whatever the word was in the prompt, to, you know, authoritatively establish control over their territories, and subsequently they thrived in 1450 and 17. But like, do you guys see how it is very possible that really smart people can write really good thesis statements that just happen to neglect to address the topic of, like, I get it, it's a little nauseating. But you're like, oh, so close, but so far away. So you just, your thesis literally has one job. The one most important thing your thesis can do is address the topic of the prompt. Doesn't matter how smart it is, how well crafted it is. If it does not address the topic of the prompt, it's not going to get the prompt. All right, let's take one more look at the documents. I would recommend, and actually I'm going to recommend, since we did this, that you guys start your discussion tomorrow with how did you source these documents. But I want to talk about documents. It's literally just a picture of this dude. So, what about document 5? Right, so do you have any idea how you could use, oh, I'm sorry. So I said that first thing tomorrow, you will probably want to talk about sourcing these documents in your meetings tomorrow and the next day. But if you look back at document 5, it's literally the Kangxi Emperor at age 45, and there he is, chilling, blue outfit, red hat, neck beard, and a book. So thumbs up, you could think you know how you would use it, or thumbs down, no clue how you might go about making that happen. just like, well, that's the unhelpful document that I'm not going to talk about. So I'm going to give you a sec to respond. All right. Somebody just PM'd me and said, I always forget there is a prompt at the top. Please don't forget that there is a prompt at the top. Okay, please don't. Please, please, pretty please, cherry on top. Maybe even right now, reach for an index card and write, don't forget there is a prompt at the top, and tape it to your computer where you will see it every day for the next 3 weeks, and you will remember it when you write your essay. There is a prompt at the top. Okay, where'd this go? All right, so we've got some stuff here about this. So 6 of you gave a thumbs up for you have an idea about how to use document 5. Is that the same people who were actually making some of you, it is. Okay, so I think Olivia has got the right idea. That was also my first thought, is the book indicates the importance of education, but Olivia said something that I hadn't thought about, which is fantastic. She said specifically his education system. So none of the other documents talk about that particular education system, but if you use, oh snap, I did not even notice the books in the back. I literally didn't. That's awesome. Which education system would this ruler have been associated with? Like, believe it or not, you know this. Olivia, stop typing. Don't tell everybody. I want them to figure it out. Like, you know this education system. You really do. Yeah. And that didn't even occur to me. But yes, he's the Chinese emperor. And even though it says nothing about how on earth Kangxi is keeping his, or Shangxi, am I saying that right? Is keeping his empire together. We know about the Confucian system, and we know that except for, a little while, it was pretty continuous. So we can infer that it is going on now, and the little book in the front and the big books in the back, yeah, that is absolutely how well, not just how that is how all of the Chinese non-self-interested, merit-based, highly centralized system was through the Confucian education system. Might be. I don't know. Is there a King's Encyclopedia? Somebody look that up and link to it? I don't know the answer to that, and that's a question that I should know the answer to. Okay, so yeah, so you can use document 5 as emblematic of the Confucian education system and that well-educated, organized, highly structured government that we were already talking about. And bonus, if you talk about how the Confucian education system... Literally, he's watching the British lads. The Grand Tour, which we love. I thought that they only made 2 seasons, but I just found out there are 2 more seasons that I have never seen, and I'm super excited. And just keep in mind that if you do watch the Grand Tour with Richard Hammond and Jeremy Clarkson and James May, just remember, if you watch it long enough, they will be wrong and discriminatory against everybody. Like, they're equal opportunity haters. They're going to hate it. Okay, but yeah, you're going to get your outside evidence point if you can discuss the Confucian education system and use it to support your thesis that education promotes a consolidated governance system and that centralized government is a great way to consolidate power. And then you got one outside evidence point because it was just that picture, and now you've interpreted, you've analyzed the picture, you have evaluated it. Hopefully when you sourced it, you were like, well, yeah, they wanted to give him all this credit for this. So you've been able to get one outside evidence point literally, truly through continuing to support your argument. So sometimes if you're able to make the connection that they're hoping that you make with the picture, you can really use it to enhance your argument. But honestly, oh, well, that's cool. Thank you, Cole. But yeah, if you usually there's a reason that they chose the picture. They didn't literally choose the picture to trick you. But maybe you are able to, maybe you know what it is and you can do something with the information. Maybe you don't. But usually there's a connection that they are hoping that you will make. That's why they put it. Okay. Whew. Well, that puts us at an hour and 34 minutes that we've been at this. What other questions do you guys have before you go off to finish writing this? Is there anything that you're desperate to know before we wrap up? Like I said, I'm going to suggest that your first discussion topic for your small group meetings is sourcing of these docs. And we just talked a little bit about how you might go about doing that for document 5. Okay, so for your next meeting, you are going to discuss sourcing of Unit 3 essay, then 4 intensively, and then 5 maybe. And also remember that I am going to join your calls a little bit later, and I'm going to join them later and later until we get to the point where you all can do this entirely on your own. But I'm probably going to join 10 to 15 minutes in. I want to be really clear. That doesn't mean show up 10 to 15 minutes late. Okay, that doesn't mean we're just starting them later. That means that I'm going to show up and sort of evaluate how it's going, and I can see how it's going based on the things I hear and also the things you guys have been typing. Okay, so when grading, that's a great question. When you were grading and the person says something that is incorrect in their thesis or context, but there's correct stuff, do they get the point? So just treat it like they never said the wrong thing. So if they said the wrong thing, but other than that, their context statement would be good enough to get the point, okay, good, fine. And then if they, it's a little trickier with the thesis statement. If their thesis hinges on the thing that's wrong, then no, they're not. Say that they have, and say that their third partition for the Unit 3 one that we were just talking about is that land-based empires consolidated their empire based on handing out magical fish, okay? If you can just delete that line and they've still got a thesis that makes an argument, then they still get the point, right? So if their thesis was they handed out magical fish, they used education to promote a loyal and centralized government, and they leveraged gunpowder to have tighter military control of their territories, they can still get the point, right? As long as they're still making the extent to which argument on the basis of partitions B and C. Partition A could be something stupid like they handed out magical fish, and they can still get the point. Okay, so if they get the historical process correct, but the causes of that, I don't understand your question. Yeah, that's fine. Just PM it to me. Does anybody else have questions? I hope that helps, because if the argument can still hang together, and understand, y'all, and this is actually really important, the College Board does not require that you have 3 partitions. I require that you have 3 partitions, because if you only said 2 things and one of them was wrong, then your argument would be pretty thin. If you say 3 things and one of them is wrong, you can still have a totally solid and valid argument. Okay? So you're not going to take off a point just because they didn't succeed at having 3 partitions. But if their argument hinges on something that is factually incorrect, then they're not going to get the point. So say, for instance, you have a well-written thesis, but your thesis says that land-based empires had almost no consolidation of power, which would be difficult to defend anyway. And then they go on to say, all the military sucked, and during this time they lost all their territory, and also it dried up and they were poor. Okay, like that's not going to get the point, because none of that is true. I don't know. I'm trying to explain that in the easiest possible way that I can. If their argument isn't historically defensible, they don't get the point. If they don't address the topic of the prompt in their argument, they don't get the point. If their argument is historically defensible, but one of their partitions is bad, but the others are fine, then they should still probably get the point. And really, guys, the whole point of having you evaluate somebody else's writing is for you to understand what it looks like when somebody does or does not respond to the prompt, and what it looks like when somebody does or does not have a defensible argument. Okay. And Liam, I got your PM. I'll respond to that. I'll respond to that privately. Other questions before you run off to write this one? Anybody else desperate to know something about how to write this essay? It was really funny. So I'm doing Zoom calls with my other class, and I think we had one that was like an hour and a half long. And then like I hadn't ended the meeting yet, but I guess that instead of leaving the meeting, this particular student unmuted himself instead of ending. And so like right as we're all about to sign off, the last thing I hear is some kid. I was like, okay, thank you for taking your time. It was, thanks for hanging in there with me. It's been a long session. And the last thing I hear before I end the call is this kid to like somebody else, like, bruh, thank God, took long enough. So that's how that's going. Luckily, I have a sense of humor, and I thought it was pretty funny. Because it did take a long time, if we're being honest. Yeah, I can try to get my kids set up for some Proto Bowl right now. Anastasia, go get your brother. Go get your brother. Okay, but we are officially done here. Unless anybody has any more questions, and you can still message me privately. And I want to help you in whatever way that I can. And don't start your meetings late just because I said that I'm going to let you get them started before I show up. Okay, so I am going to sign off. and I will talk to you guys later. Yeah, you guys should